18 O'Clock Music Bath by Unno Jūza. Originally published in 1937, this is from a collection of science fiction stories, all of which were written between the 1920s and 1940s, and was not translated to English until 2021, when they were published together with the title Fast Forward Japan, Stories by the Founding Father of Japanese Science Fiction. Unno Jūza is the pen name of the author born as Shōichi Sano. He was heavily inspired by Jules Verne and Nikola Tesla, and commonly satirized Japanese military culture and expansion. By the late 1930s, he was co-opted into writing militaristic propaganda, inadvertently delivering a painful irony to his professional life. English translation by J.D. Wisgo. Read by Daryl T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. 18 O'Clock Music Bath. Chapter 1. In the wake of the sun, twilight fell upon the earth. At the edge of encroaching dusk, the 18 o'clock time signal solemnly commanded the hearts of his nation's 1 million citizens. Oh, it's 18 o'clock. Time for the 18 o'clock music bath. All right, everyone, quickly take your seats and don't be late. In Alicia District, there were only three, Professor Koek and the college students, Penn and Bara. They had opened the door and darted into the blue hallway an instant before hearing the time signal. A row of seats stretched far down the hallway, each made from a thick, silvery, luminescent metal pipe bent into a spiral. Each person jumped into the chair bearing their name. As if on cue, 3 round yellow windows opened in the ceiling and released sprays of yellow onto the figures below. Delightfully refreshing sprays. The 3 waited in silence for the music bath to begin. Professor Koek was a middle-aged man clothed in the same color as his long, inky black hair, combed back messily as if he'd hastily run his fingers through it. A slender build complemented his above-average height. His features had a graceful quality to them, yet at the same time gave the impression of a passion bubbling quietly, but vigorously, beneath his slightly pale skin. Elbows resting on knees, the professor sat deeply in his spiral chair, as if in deep thought. At times his eyelids would jerk back and forth in their sockets, perhaps because the eyeballs beneath were writhing in agony. Penn was young, a similar age to Bara. He extended his hand towards Bara, sitting beside him, moving slowly to avoid being caught, and touched her plump backside. Slap. Bara's reprimand needed no words. The back of Penn's hand was red and swollen. Still, it continued to plead, to seduce. Only 2 more hours. Bara's hand whispered softly to Penn's hand, but Penn's hand persisted. I may be gone before 2 hours is up, so please, darling, just for this moment, shh, the warning signal was just given. A voice burst from the loudspeaker. 1 person is missing in the neighboring Alishiro district. As if part of a prearranged sequence, they each turned to look to the right, towards Alishiro district. Just then the door opened, and a man darted into the hallway. In a fluster, he hopped frog-like into his seat. Oh, it's Paul, Penn said with a chuckle. That scrap battery is probably doing dissections on his own again. What an indecent man, Bara said and spat in disgust. A purple light flooded the length of the hallway. Professor Koek slowly raised his head. All right, the music bath is starting. Now raise your hands, the professor advised his 2 students. Just as 3 pairs of hands went up, the music began. a barely audible groan emanating from somewhere deep in the earth. "Shoot, it's that terrible soul-stealing number 39, Penn cursed to himself. Transmitted through the spiral chairs, national melody number 39 progressively intensified. The professor stared dumbly into space. Bara's eyes were closed, lips twitching. Penn gritted his teeth together tightly below a profusely sweating forehead. The national melody continued its slow build, cooking the citizens' brainstems like scalding steam. Moans akin to wild beasts emerged from various places along the long, purple-tinged hallway, and the wall reverberated violently as if fired upon by a cannon. Behold, the purple purgatory. The music bath progressed amid the citizens' sticky sweat and wailing voices. 30 minutes later, the purple rays of light began to weaken little by little, until at last a refreshing spray rained down through the yellow, circular windows onto their heads, just like in the beginning. The music bath was over. As if roused from a nightmare, the citizens in their spiral chairs gazed up at the ceiling and looked around vacantly. The music bath is over. All right, let's get out of here. There's a mountain of fabric waiting for us back at the factory. Yeah, we should make up for that schedule slippage yesterday. The citizens, bursting with energy, hopped out of their spiral chairs. With a spring in their step and a renewed vigor nothing like their former selves, Penn and Bara followed after the lively Professor Koek and returned to Alicia District. Chapter 2. The call had come from Ottawa District. Professor Koek walked over and pressed the button on the receiver. A momentary ripple in its mirror-like surface quickly became President Miluki's face, buried in a thick beard. "President Miluki, long live the Empire," the professor said in greeting. "Ah, Professor, I have a matter to discuss with you in private." The beard wiggled as he spoke. The professor acknowledged this and turned around, ordering Penn and Bara to the adjacent workshop. The students each grabbed 2 handfuls of papers from the desk, pushed open the door, and escaped to the next room. "I'm alone now. What would this be about?" "Well, the fact of the matter is that I would like to express my respect for you, Professor. Thanks to the tremendous power of your music bath, this nation is under my complete control. At the end of each bath, it is as if each and every one of my citizens has been reborn. Each and every person burns with the same ideals of this nation and is ready to apply themselves fully to their duties with an equal passion. They do my bidding without exception, just like androids. Even the most brutal, dangerous criminal is transformed into a model citizen after a 30-minute music bath. Each of my people is in perfect health, and I have you, Professor, to thank for these wonderful citizens. You have my deepest respect. The cost of the android research has risen to half of the national budget. Why must we spend such a vast sum of money on this project? What I mean is that with our music bath system in place, there is no need for androids. Professor, how do you feel about this matter? I understand what Your Excellency is saying. Please permit me to think things over. Yes, you do that. Oh, I nearly forgot. My wife apparently wants to see you. Can you stop by for a little while this evening? Yes, Your Excellency, I will pay her a visit at 20 o'clock tonight. In the workshop next door, Penn and Bara earnestly continued their calculations. They were so involved in their work they had no awareness of each other's presence. Even here, the effect of the music bath was tremendous. In this nation, the hour immediately following the music bath was the most precious. The most important tasks were all undertaken in this short time period with superhuman ability. The National Defense Shield, nutritional provisions, mixed bacteria, Each of these was improved or redesigned during this hour. Once it was over, everyone either pursued work that didn't require creativity, played, or slept, while the 18 o'clock music bath turned the entire populace into geniuses for an hour. It also forced them to follow the nation's sound ideals for the remaining 23 hours. The music bath was based on the earth-shaking vibrational music of the central music plant, channeled to human brains through spiral-shaped chairs, massaging brain cells and transforming each citizen into a uniformly outstanding, standardized subject. In recent times, the music bath has utilized National Melody number 39, a melody skillfully refined over many iterations by the professor at President Mileuki's request, designed for the purpose of creating so-called Type 39 standard subjects. Type 39 standard subjects were those who fulfilled some 39 conditions identified by the president as necessary for his citizens. An exhaustive list of all 39 conditions will be omitted here, but to point out a few: to be loyal to the president, to possess an unyielding spirit, to not want after alcohol, to not smoke, to maintain good health through 4 hours of sleep, and to recognize the president immediately upon seeing his beard. President Mileuki had given out some very forbidding conditions. When Professor Koek completed National Melody number 39, the president was ecstatic. The song was experimentally tested on the nation's worst felon, who was promptly reformed into a model citizen, exactly as President Mileuki had desired, so it was only natural for him to be shocked so terribly that he nearly passed out. Thus, the president ordered the successful music bath to be left playing over the radio waves, exposing the citizens to it 24 hours a day. However, this idea was rejected by Professor Koek. He objected on the grounds that the music bath unnaturally stimulates brain cells and overexposure will destroy them, leading to sudden death. Hence, current regulations limit the music bath to only 30 minutes a day, as per the professor's guidance. The president, if given such an opportunity, nonetheless wished to extend the time in order to completely capture the souls of the populace. He had just expressed to the professor his joy at having such perfect citizens, but that was nothing more than an empty compliment. In reality, the people were in a continual state of tension throughout the day, far from living complaint-free. Chapter 3. The time was sometime after 19 o'clock. Speaking of 19 o'clock, this time corresponds with what used to be called 7 p.m. in the old manner of expressing time. In this underground nation, the people lived under constant artificial lighting, with no true dawn or dusk, but the sun's languid rays continued to shine down upon the earth's surface, serving as the roof of the entire nation. Not even a butterfly flew above the surface. As a result of repeated wars, bacteria and poisonous gas had caused great ruin, resulting in a place of great desolation, devoid of life and unable to support even a single blade of grass. The surviving humans, along with a small number of livestock and parasitic organisms, managed to escape underground and preserve their species. Now, returning to the matter of what happened after 19 o'clock. Pen from Alicia district and Paul, a shoemaker of Alishiro, engaged in a heated discussion as they licked the inside of a honey jar in a private room. "Come on, don't you think this is completely ridiculous?" Paul gestured largely as he spoke, trying his best to convince Pen. "Well, yes," said Pen, a hint of confusion on his face. "That's all you have to say, Pen? Our freedom is being taken from us, our individuality ignored. As human beings, we want to smoke tobacco. We want to drink alcohol, but His Excellency, the asshole, won't let us drink or smoke. What do we have to live for anymore?" "Hey, please keep your voice down. It won't be good if someone hears us." "Geez, give me a break. If somebody does hear us, I'm sure they'd agree completely. Anybody who doesn't is a poor sap, still under the influence of that abominable melody number 39. By the way, Paul, it seems like the president's beloved music bath isn't having much of an effect on you." "Of course it's not," Paul said brazenly, puffing up his chest. "What I'm about to tell you is in the strictest confidence. Now, touch my backside for a moment." Eyes shining with curiosity, Penn did as he was told and touched the back of Paul's pants. There, he felt something with a rough texture, like a bamboo cage. "Oh my, what is this? What did you put in there?" Paul laughed. "You know what I did? This, you see, is a vibration attenuator that I created over a year using strengthened fibers. As you know, only a small part of that music bath comes in through the ears. Most of it comes from the ground, entering the body through those spiral chairs. By simply putting the vibration attenuator into my pants like this, I can significantly reduce the vibrations of melody number 39 being transmitted through the spiral chair. That's why that soul-eating music can't get to me." Interesting. You're certainly a man who toys with danger, but what if you're discovered?" "If I'm discovered, I'll know you blabbed. Now listen up. If you keep quiet, I'll never be discovered. I'm quite skilled at groaning to pretend that my soul is being devoured by that music. I even sweat profusely. You probably didn't know this, but there are microphones hidden in the front of the seats. All of our groaning voices are transmitted to the department of the Prime Minister's observation room. All of your groans are clearly monitored on a self-recording readout. If you forget to groan, an alarm will go off. I would never make that kind of mistake." The disgusted look on Penn's face grew more pronounced by the moment. He was shocked that one of his close friends was a man who was shamelessly pulling one over on President Milwaukee, the lord of the underworld, judge of good and evil. Behind every formidable government was an equally formidable opposition. Penn realized that Paul wasn't the only participant in this crime. While speaking to Paul, he felt the anesthetic effect of the music bath gradually wear off. Penn felt that he himself, like Paul, was a blasphemer of President Milwaukee. "Hey, Paul, you'd better be careful about Bara. She was making a big fuss about how you were a scrap battery. If she gets wind of your big secret, it's not going to be pretty." "Penn, Bara is your wife. As long as you don't screw up, there's no fear of her finding out." "Yeah, but that woman is as shrewd as any man. I can't tell her what to do." "Penn, for a husband, you sure whine miserably." "Actually, I'm considering giving up being a husband. Being married to a woman like that completely sucks the life out of me." "Really? Are you serious? If you got divorced, I'm sure you'd just find another wife. Do you have someone in mind?" "Are you kidding? There aren't any nice girls out there who are right for me. Hey, Paul, to be honest, I think it would be great if you weren't my guy friend, but my girlfriend." "Girlfriend?" Paul blinked his eyes, mouth agape. "Penn, do you really mean that?" "Do I mean it? Of course I do. Why would you ask that sort of thing?" Paul grabbed Penn's hand and silently led him behind a dividing partition in the corner of the room. There was the sound of clothes shuffling. Paul's shirt appeared, draped over the top of the partition. There was a clang as a belt was drooped over the partition. At that moment, a startled yell came from behind the partition. Penn's screams drowned out the voice of Paul, trying to calm him down. "Oh, that's what she meant by the rumor you were doing dissections on your own body. That is some serious surgery you've done. You disgust me." Chapter 4. It was exactly 20 o'clock, as promised. A lone figure stood before a door in Ottawa district. A tall, neatly dressed man. Lady Miluki, read the nameplate on the door. The door slid silently down into the ground. Inside was a wall of pure white satin. A beautiful woman stood before it, evoking a relief sculpture. From the neck down, she wore equally white, skin-tight clothes of satin, or perhaps we should call it a new type of underwear with connected top and bottom, extending to the wrists and ankles. Underneath, a loose, translucent gown made from infinitesimally thin, flexible glass that glowed brightly as it trailed behind her. "Ah, Professor Koek, I presume?" The man kneeled down reverently upon hearing Lady Miluki's pure, bell-like voice. "I pledge my loyalty to you, my lady." Lady Miluki laughed daintily and led the professor into a room. Inside was a dazzling array of decorations, checkered in gold and red from ceiling to floor. Expensive crystalware cluttered a large glass table in the center of the room. A lavish dinner had been prepared in advance. Lady Miluki motioned for the professor to sit in a chair across from her. In the middle of the glass table was an object shaped like a tall bookcase. Lady Miluki pressed a button, and a conveyor belt within began to move vertically in the fashion of an elevator. Various items, such as aged liquors and delicious-looking dishes, emerged quietly from below the table and were mechanically placed before them. Used dishes were automatically lowered below the table, disappearing from sight. When the lady raised a glass of vintage 1937 wine, the professor immediately raised his own glass as an instinctual reaction. When she grabbed some hornet larvae and raised them to her mouth, he followed suit. They conversed in the pauses between bites. "Professor, the music bath you have designed has produced amazing results. President Miluki himself is exceedingly pleased. You have my greatest respect." The professor bowed his head and remained silent. "But having said that," she said, pausing to put down her wine glass, "the contributions of your music bath are tremendous, and yet I cannot help but be concerned by the equally tremendous problems it is causing." The professor froze, moving only his mouth in response. "Problems? The music bath is an affront to the people's humanity. National Melody No. 39 was created based only on the conditions of a self-serving ruler. People are altered to be prone to mental manipulation, yet there is no consideration given to whether it is reasonable to perform such alteration on an actual human being. Indeed, thanks to the music bath, the nation's people have improved incredibly in many areas, including their physical condition, productivity, and even conduct. But on the other hand, forsaking their humanity is causing a toxic buildup of discontent within their bodies. As this accumulates day and night, things will inevitably reach a breaking point in the near future. I sense that a subset of the populace has already come to realize this toxic buildup of discontent. Even assuming there was some sort of discontent accumulating, shouldn't the 18 o'clock music bath be eliminating that? It only appears to be. Perhaps it does eliminate it for a time, but it does not eliminate it completely. An anesthetic is, after all, only an anesthetic. There is no way someone as wise as you would not realize this. Lady Miluki, I am but a scientist who has sworn allegiance to the president, and I act only in accordance with his orders. I implore you, be silent. You claim to be nothing but a scientist who invents things such as an android or a music bath. But why, oh, why are you only a scientist? You could be a far better politician. You are such a distinguished figure that even the president is no match for you. You greatly exaggerate, my lady. I am simply a citizen who has pledged allegiance to the President, a man who strives to follow orders faithfully. That cannot be. You cannot imagine how much better off this country would be if you were in control instead of Meluki. If you were our ruler, I myself would be unmeasurably happier. Now, Professor, face me and look into my eyes. Behold my quivering lips. You are the only man in this world to whom I can entrust my body and soul. Oh, Professor, I beseech you to hold me, to command me. I will do anything for you. As Meluki's beautiful wife, if I speak even a single word before the people, they will obey. If I declare that to you, Professor Koek, are the only one whom I truly love and respect, and order the nation to swear loyalty to you, I am certain that all million citizens will immediately comply. Come, let us build a better nation together. Let us build a new nation where we put above all else the people's desires, love, lust, and personal choice. Professor, hold me now. Lady Meluki twisted her supple body in the likeness of a reptile as she stood up from her chair and threw herself directly onto Professor Koek's lap. Chapter 5. Oh, Professor, is there something wrong with you? Lady Meluki raised her voice in concern from the professor's lap. The professor continued staring wordlessly into space. Why, your body is as cold as a corpse. I feel chilled as atop a block of ice. Oh, how terribly unpleasant. I question whether you are even a living being. The professor giggled. I seem to be dead and yet living at the same time. Pardon, could you repeat that? She said, clinging to the professor's chest, but just then the door burst open and a group of people clamored into the room. Among them was President Meluki and the wiry-haired Secretary of State, Madame Asari. In the blink of an eye, Lady Meluki jumped off the professor. President Meluki, large eyes bulging out from within his beard, shook his fist like a steel ball as he approached the professor. What a wondrous scene we have here! Since the laws prohibit sexual relations between a commoner and the president's wife, I never expected to see such a sight. I don't know whether you were aware of this, but the horrendous scene of blasphemy has been broadcast live to the entire country. It is not just I who has witnessed this, but the entire nation. I presume both of you are fully aware of the consequences of your actions. Assuming that there was a TV broadcast sent nationwide, everything I said in this room must have been heard and understood by everyone. That undoubtedly proves my innocence. Madame Asari then stepped out from behind the president, her face red with hatred. Professor, it's a real pity, but only your actions were visible on the TV broadcast. As the audio transmission was shut off, not even a peep came from the loudspeakers. That's why I doubt even a single citizen knows what you were saying. What? Broadcasting only our images, but not our voices? You ask me to believe such a ridiculous thing? With all due respect, Your Excellency, current regulations mandate that TV broadcasts shall be accompanied by audio. Professor Koek's sudden burst of eloquence was a drastic change from only moments ago. The Secretary of State laughed impudently. The laws are decided by the President. Hypothetically, if today he were to amend the law to no longer require TV and audio to be broadcast together, your objection would no longer hold water. Am I wrong? That's why I am honored to respectfully declare that such an amendment was just enacted today. No longer is it illegal to broadcast TV on its own. I will not permit such deception. This is a depraved plot to fabricate a romantic relationship between the lady and I. Why this slander? Why this fraud? Please explain at once." Standing erect, Professor Koek spat out the words as if breathing fire. Color quickly drained from the president's bearded face, but he still gave the order, voice quivering. "All this talk is pointless. Secretary Asari, you will have them executed as I had previously decreed. Immediately." After issuing this declaration, he stormed outside the room, following after Madame Asari, closing the door behind him. Lady Miluki, her back to the wall as she quietly watched this exchange, tried to dart from the room herself in shock at what just happened, but the door, like a wall of solid steel, refused to move even the slightest bit. "Please open the door. What are you trying to do to me? President, this isn't how things were supposed to happen." Lady Miluki pounded the door frantically. She pressed the button next to the door again and again, but the door still showed no sign of movement. Just then, a hissing sound, like gas leaking from a pipe, came from somewhere in the room. The lady was the first to discern the sound. She began wringing her own neck with lithe, lipstick-red fingers. "Oh, my! It's poison gas! Why would you ever kill me? Please open the door." With a quiet hiss, the light gray poison gas gathered low on the ground, swirling like mist, then inched higher and higher. The area around Lady Miluki's windpipe soon darkened to a deep crimson. Her fingers reddened. The tiny red droplets splattered even onto the white silk on her chest. Face pale, the lady's breath rasped violently like a bellows. Professor Koek stood unmoving like a clay figure within the grayish gas, completely oblivious to the lady writhing in agony beside him. He appeared to be lost in thought. Suddenly he began moving, running around the room in circles like a squirrel searching for something on the four surrounding walls. Thanks to a TV receiver, the room's interior could be clearly seen from outside. On the wall-mounted receiver, Lady Miluki could be seen suffering in agony. Professor Koek continued running in circles like a madman. Staring intently into the TV receiver were President Miluki and Secretary of State, Madame Asari. They watched the events unfold inside the room with a burning interest. But before long, they realized something was wrong. The professor's face now filled the TV receiver's screen. The lens of the transmitter had been found at last. The next instant, just as the professor raised a chair over his head, the screen flashed and the image went dead. Standing before the receiver, they took turns spinning dials, but not even a blip appeared on the screen. The device that had been capturing the room's interior had been completely destroyed. President Miluki and the wiry-haired Madame Asari locked eyes. "We can't see anything. What should we do?" "There's no longer any need to watch. Clearly they will both die in there." "I'm not too sure of that, Madame. I have no doubt of it." Right as she said this, a deafening roar bellowed from the direction of Lady Miluki's room. Miluki exclaimed in surprise, covering his ears. "What is going on over there?" "President, let's quickly go see what happened. The professor may have broken down the door and escaped." But the door was still firmly in place. After talking it over, they decided to attempt opening the door. An electrician standing guard switched on the power so the door came down smoothly when they pressed the button. They dashed into the room. It looked like a great explosion had occurred, with nothing left of the luxurious decorations, only a terrible state of ruin that was painful on the eyes. Legs and arms were scattered about in pieces on the floor. When the secretary stepped into the room to pick up one of the limbs, a flame suddenly enveloped the floor with a whoosh, as if in wait of their arrival. Even Madame Asari, normally a strong, brave woman, stood petrified, lost at what to do in such a situation. The pieces of body parts strewn upon the floor disappeared into the flames. The bodies of Lady Maluki and Professor Koek were assumed to have turned to smoke, by now drifting through Ottawa district, but the source of the blast was never found. The only possibility that came to mind was that the professor had carried it in himself. As to why he would have prepared an explosive and ignited it, killing himself in the process, President Maluki couldn't find a satisfying answer to this. Chapter 6. Never in 1,000 years could Penn and Bara have guessed the terrible fate that had befallen Professor Koek. Bara exchanged offensive jokes with Penn in her private room, but before long their excitement fizzled out like a typhoon breaking up a cloud of mist. In the midst of their boredom, they found themselves sighing lazily. They both wondered why things felt so dull. "These days, you've been rather aloof," said Penn. "Look who's talking. Don't blame me," Bara said, gently rubbing the caress doll that lay beside her pillow. The caress doll was a popular item used to stimulate the sense of touch through rubbing, recently discovered as an alternative pleasure to smoking, the latter now being prohibited by law. "You've grown tired of me, haven't you?" "Well, I don't know. I just feel so irritated lately. I can't put my finger on it, but it's like there's some lingering doubt building within me, day by day. I have this strong feeling I'm about to fall mentally ill because my body can't take it anymore." "Now that you mention it, I can't say I don't feel the same way. So basically you're sick of me and have fallen in love with someone else." "Oh, no, that's not it at all. Maybe it's not only you that I'm tired of, but everyone." "If you're tired of everyone, you're done for. I'm not like that, although I won't claim I don't hate anyone. Earlier today I told Paul that he disgusted me. He really is an indecent man. You were right." "Right about what?" "You said he was dissecting his own body, didn't you?" "Seriously? You mean that rumor?" "That's right. Paul did surgery on his own body. That's why he disgusts me. Keep this between us, but he's trying to change his gender." "What? Change his gender? Oh, maybe he... Yes. Tell me more." "Well, there's not much to tell, isn't it obvious? That guy has done surgery to cease being a man and has nearly completed the transition to a woman." "Seriously? Is that sort of thing even possible?" "Possible? He's practically achieved his goal. How disgusting. This terrible situation is all because of advances in VHF surgery that have made performing surgery on the human body easy, just like making a sculpture. In an age where even androids can be made, of course we can do something like that. But a living being changing his or her own gender? That takes some serious determination. What a wonderful idea." For some reason, Bara suddenly got out of bed and, with an air of excitement, pounded her flat chest with her bulky arms. "What's wrong with you? Why are you acting like that?" Penn yelled, frowning. "Oh, he's done such a wonderful thing. Paul really outdid himself. That man is too good to be a shoemaker. Now that you mention it, I'm not surprised what he did. After all, for us oppressed citizens, it's the only escape, or shall I say the only way of rebelling against the government. With smoking prohibited, drinking banned, and that soul-wrenching 18 o'clock music bath, what freedoms do we have left? Thanks to advances in medicine, we've obtained eternal life and preservation of youth. Death only happens as a result of capital punishment or suicides, the latter requiring exceptional ingenuity to pull off. There's no need to give birth to children except when a special order is given by the government. When someone is given the death penalty, the government selects a woman to be artificially inseminated. She becomes pregnant with a single baby and is admitted into the National Hospital of Reproduction to give birth to a new person, replenishing the lost one. In ancient times, the purpose of sexual desire was for procreation, but in the modern age, we know only sexual desire for its own sake. In Muluki Nation, we have had every possible liberty taken from us, save a newfound sexual independence and freedom, and yet until now we have not known how to enjoy that freedom in any real sense. Paul is indeed a wise man, the true hero of this nation. He has made sex into a sport and devised a way to escape from the yoke of gender, all in order to liberate humanity and pave the way to a new world of freedom. No longer must I remain a woman for my entire life. I can become a man. If I changed from a woman to a man, I wonder if you would feel the same about me. Overpowered by Bara's impassioned tirade, Penn was dumbfounded. He sighed and parted his trembling lips to speak. You becoming a man? What a horrific notion. This relationship is over. It's now painfully clear to me there's yet another thing to make my life miserable. Chapter 7. On account of an emergency call from Secretary of State Madame Asari, students Penn and Bara had to leave the room immediately. They had received word that the Secretary and President Muluki would be visiting Alicia District in 5 minutes. The pair adeptly transferred to the express conveyor road and made it back to Alicia District just in time. I don't see Professor Koek. I wonder what happened to him. I'm not sure. It's the appointed time and he's not here. How strange. They immediately noticed the professor's absence. Fearing President Muluki's wrath, they called all manner of people and searched each room, but there was no sign of the professor anywhere. You searched inside the laboratory closet and under the desk too, right? Penn asked. Of course. I did everything I could, but I couldn't find him anywhere. Nobody seems to know either. Nobody? Who did you ask? Who? Bara laughed. I asked everyone. For some reason, Bara's frown became an awkward smile. Shortly after, they heard an uproar outside that they took to be the secretary's arrival. They both rushed to the door. Oh my, the president is... They had expected the secretary to arrive by herself, yet to their great surprise she escorted the president, who now stood there arrogantly. Madame Asari barged into the room, casting a scornful look at Penn and Bara. Then she turned away, though not towards anyone in particular, and began to speak. Professor Koek of Alicia District has been executed today as punishment for his part in the scandalous incident involving Lady Muluki. Therefore, for the time being, I, Secretary Asari, will take charge of that district, concurrent with my existing post. Additionally, Bara is hereby ordered to become provisional vice head. That is all. Penn and Bara began to tremble hysterically as if electrocuted. This was the first they had heard of the professor's violent death. It was hard to believe that anything scandalous could have occurred between Professor Koek and Lady Muluki. The professor had shut himself up in the laboratory and devoted nearly all 24 hours of the day to his work. He wouldn't have had the time or the motivation to get involved in such a thing. But if he did, what exactly would it entail? Besides, Professor Koek was the nation's #1, or more accurately, the nation's star scientist. He was Muluki Nation's most valuable treasure. Under direction from President Muluki, the professor had designed and built a variety of cultural facilities. Executing him amounted to an act of suicide for the nation. Who was going to continue the professor's work with him gone? What a terribly thoughtless death sentence. Furthermore, what would become of the androids that had been in development, having already consumed an enormous portion of the national budget? The professor's two pupils felt as if the ground had suddenly caved in before their eyes to form a several-kilometer gorge. And thus, Vice Head Madame Barra, I hereby order you to accompany the President on an inspection of the entire Alicia district, where Professor Koek had been assigned. You will depart for your assignment immediately. Barra felt a tinge of joy at being called vice head, though she had no desire to lead the President through Alicia district. But an order was an order. She had no choice but to begin guiding President Maluki's party through each room, beginning with the next workshop. The entire Alicia district was on a single floor with a total of 16 rooms in various sizes, but the only one intimately familiar with all 16 rooms was Professor Koek. Barra knew of 9 of them and Penn only 6. All citizens from the same district were legally permitted to have knowledge of every inch of that area, but the professor had broken convention and restricted access to the laboratory based on position. The inspection of the first 6 rooms completed without any difficulty. To be sure, they found some unusual things, but nothing particularly shocking. Then Barra turned to face the crowd and spoke. Beginning with the 7th room, our laboratories mainly focused on secret android research. We will be coming across some strange sights now, so please be prepared, she said, not forgetting to warn them. They entered the 7th room, where, sure enough, there was a great number of large-scale power machinery standing together like trees in a forest. Each contained a nuclear decomposition engine powered by artificial cosmic rays. The units were organized into 24 hubs, each further branching off into numerous power distribution wires that were fed through transformers. One wall of the room was covered with bundles of these wires, a sight resembling a piece of knitted fabric viewed under a microscope. The complete absence of sound gave the impression of being on the bottom of the ocean, making the room that much more disturbing. They entered the 8th room, where reference specimens were stored, a place perhaps best called a museum of automata. All manner of man-made automata were put on display, beginning with items from the 4th century BC. Approximately 700 models were present, marionette-like contraptions and armored warriors, progressing to radio-controlled units built with relays and remarkably human-like models with artificial skin. These specimens of automata gazed eternally at the ceiling with eerie expressions, tightly crowded like a hall of mummies, stiff shoulder to stiff shoulder. Penn stared wide-eyed as he wrung his hands, clearly made uncomfortable by the strangeness of these rooms he was seeing for the first time. Now, this is the 9th room. Things will get a little noisy here, Barra said in the manner of a tour guide. President Maluki and the secretary exchanged anxious glances, but a moment later they thrust out their chests and elbows, trying to act tough, in front of the door to the 9th room. Despite having promised to guide the party, for some reason Barra hesitated awkwardly to open the door. Secretary Asari quickly picked up on this and got hysterical, as she was apt to do. "Open the door this instant! Dawdling here will not do us any good," Madame Asari said as she glared at Barra. Still, Barra's hesitation continued. She even withdrew her handkerchief frequently and dabbed sweat from her forehead. Penn grew concerned when he saw Barra's behavior and backed away from the door. The secretary's face gradually reddened as rage bubbled up inside her. So, you aren't going to open it. Well, if you aren't, I will, but you best prepare to be punished. Just as the secretary tried to push open the door, Bara leaped in front of it. That's dangerous. Please stop. If you open the door now, it will explode. Chapter 8. Hearing the word explode sent a chill down Madame Asari's spine. It had triggered her memory of when they had tried to cruelly murder the professor in Lady Meluki's room, and there was an unexpected explosion, tearing off both of their limbs and scattering the pieces everywhere. Well then, we have no choice. I will open the door after engaging the failsafe. Her face devoid of fear as if accepting her fate, Bara began twiddling 3 dials in front of the door. 3 pilot lights blinked in succession. Green, red, then yellow. Soon the door began to open silently inwards. The group fearfully peered inside the room through the slowly widening gap. The 9th room is where the professor had stored his prototypes. Please refrain from teasing the creatures inside. Bara leading the way, they cautiously entered the room. The group was shocked by the very first thing they laid their eyes on. Of all things, a naked woman stood there, surveying their faces in a glance. She looked approximately 17 or 18 years of age, boasting a beautiful body of pure, glossy white, which called to mind frozen milk. But more than anything, it was her charming face that caught their eyes. Search the world and you'll never find a girl quite as good-looking. Something about her was reminiscent of Venus de Milo, but perhaps it would be better to say she more closely resembled an angel. Not particularly embarrassed about her body, which literally lacked even a shred of clothing, she smiled at the group. "What a beauty!" President Meluki cried out shamelessly with a lascivious joy. "What's her name?" "She has been given the name Annette," answered Bara on behalf of the young girl. "Oh, so her name is Annette. That's a really nice name, but I think it would be better to give her a name that is simpler and suits her better." "But, Your Excellency, you mustn't misunderstand. Annette is an android. Please take a close look at her body." "What? Look at her body?" President Meluki opened his eyes wide like saucers and slowly looked over Annette's body. "Ah, I see." When the president looked down, he couldn't help but smile, for he had discovered a part of her body that was incomplete, very different from that of a real human. "Well then, please allow me to explain. What you see living in this room are all experimental creatures made by Professor Koek. This 4-legged thing that looks like a piglet has an artificial heart and body, and a brain transplanted from a German shepherd. Next, we have a monkey with the brain of a human child." Standing before the wire cages, Bara described the creatures one by one. It was a collection of incredibly strange creatures. There wasn't an ordinary one in the bunch. Some looked human. There was the top half of a man soaking in a large glass container filled with a yellow liquid. He held a glass tube to his mouth with both hands and continually sipped a purple liquid. Tracing the tube to its origin, there was an elaborate chemical apparatus attached, but at the input to the apparatus, the liquid inside the tube was yellow. Essentially, a cycle was formed by a yellow liquid being transformed to a purple liquid and then back to yellow as it passed through the half body. Bara explained that it was a new experiment focused on studying nutritional intake. Even during Bara's explanations, President Meluki seemed anxious, distracted by the android, Annette. Secretary Madame Asari didn't fail to take notice of the president's demeanor, and because of that, her face gradually paled as her body trembled. However, President Meluki did not seem to pay attention to the madame's reaction, and instead separated from the group, returning to where Annette was standing. "Lovely Annette, what are you doing here?" Annette smiled broadly like a deranged mute woman. "Oh, Your Excellency." Bara approached the president with a look of concern. "Annette is a prototype, so she only understands a special set of codes. She doesn't know the Malukian language." "What? She doesn't understand Malukian? How terribly inconvenient," he said. But the president's attraction only grew stronger toward Annette, who perhaps should be called a crazed beauty. Just then, the secretary gritted her teeth together tightly as if struggling to restrain herself, then ran over to Annette's side. Face drained of color, the secretary withdrew a knife from an inner breast pocket with a flash and, holding it like an ice pick, moved her arm to thrust it straight into Annette's heart. But at the last moment, Bara jumped on Madame Asari's arm, risking her own life, and just managed to prevent harm to the android. But the secretary was in a frenzy, and Bara herself was extremely worked up. "Secretary, what are you doing?" "That's none of your business. I have the authority to kill this android, and I will. Please refrain from killing her." "Why are you interfering? It may be wrong to kill a living human being, but what is so wicked about killing a mechanical android? Just looking at this good-for-nothing woman makes me sick to my stomach. By my authority, I will kill Annette." No, you must not kill Annette. In the several weeks since her construction, she has looked after the prototypes in this room. She has spoken with us, and we have become friends. Annette is no different than a real person. Killing her is just absurd." Bara held tightly to the secretary's arm that gripped the knife and refused to let go. "So, you wish to oppose the Secretary of State? Well, then you will not be forgiven." "But please, Madame Asari, I beg you to reconsider. And another thing, we should protect the ones that remain, because if the professor is gone, we may never be able to build androids again. That would be the worst possible loss for Maluki Nation." "The worst possible loss? How presumptuous of you." Madame Asari chuckled. "I suppose you've fallen in love with this android." Bara was silent. The secretary grabbed hold of Bara's hair and, in a fit of rage, tried to drag her down to the floor. President Maluki, shocked by this, roared out, "Wait! Madame Asari, by the name of Maluki, I prohibit you from causing harm to this android. These androids are a precious product of our nation's research. Over time, I've spent 80 billion rukul on this research. You cannot kill these androids. Now put away the knife." "Your Excellency," Madame Asari said as she grabbed the president by his collar, "I will obey your order, but promise me this. You must never speak to these good-for-nothing androids like they are real people. Yes, I know that, and you know more than anyone that I have no ulterior motives here." With that, the secretary's eyes suddenly narrowed as she blushed in embarrassment. In the corner, Penn stood alone, disgusted by what had happened. "Oh, how very unpleasant. Bara has fallen in love with an android, and the secretary is having an affair with President Maluki. With all this going on, there was really no reason for me to hold back. My good friend Paul the shoemaker altered his body to become a woman, but he surely did it in order to be with me. All right, I think I'll go and settle things with Paul now." Chapter 9. The next morning, President Maluki and Secretary Asari were having breakfast together. Even though the secretary was wearing pajamas, the president had on regular clothes. "Your Excellency, I'm aware that you slipped out late last night. You can't keep it secret from me. Where were you?" "No, well, you see, there's no use trying to hide things from me. One of my men just told me he had spotted you around Alicia District." You're saying someone saw me in Alicia District? President Maluki said, eyes wide. On what business did you go through all the trouble to get out of bed in the middle of the night? Business? Oh, it was nothing special. It seems like you have some misunderstanding, and I don't like it. Yesterday we discovered something in Alicia District, did we not? Discovered what? Well, we discovered that basically, what was that again? Yesterday we went to check out Alicia District, but could only see up to the 9th room. There was all that fuss about how if we tried to forcibly open the door leading to rooms 10 and beyond, it would explode, but not being able to enter those rooms was proof of the unpleasant fact that there exist places in this nation where my absolute power does not extend to. In light of that extremely unfortunate fact, I went there to investigate whether there was any way to get inside. My, aren't you courageous lately? So, were you able to get inside of the 10th room as you had hoped? No, I failed. You should have known that from the start. Anyway, why were you in Alicia District until morning? Come now, I was simply doing my best to try and get the door open. Yes, of course, but I don't know what door you were actually trying to open. Madame Asari turned towards a blue parrot on a nearby metal perch and held out her fork, a piece of meat stuck on its tip. With blinding speed, the hungry bird opened its beak and snapped up the meat, but a moment later there was the sound of something falling to the floor. The hungry parrot had dropped the precious piece of meat on the ground without the slightest hesitation. Here now, Pinto, the president called the bird's name. Are you not feeling well? Thereupon, Madame Asari answered on behalf of the parrot. No, Pinto is in perfect health. He's just saying that the disgusting android meat doesn't suit his taste. Did you just say android meat? President Maluki jumped up from his chair, shocked. He turned his gaze to Madame Asari's feet where there was a heaping pile of red meat chunks in a large metal dish. The president, a disturbed look on his face, caught sight of a trail of blood drops leading from the dish to somewhere behind the inner curtains. You did this, didn't you? President Maluki rushed frantically over to the curtain and on its far side discovered a pile of intricate machine parts dismantled. On the edge of the pile was the beautiful face of a woman. Though slightly discolored, it maintained a bright smile as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, the president immediately burst into a rage, like a volcano erupting. Why did you kill her? Why did you kill Annette? Yes, you must have been jealous of her beauty, you bitch. I had given you a strict order to not kill the androids, which you blatantly disobeyed. Secretary or not, you will never be forgiven for this. Madame Asari sat down, calmly sipped her beverage from the glass, and then spoke. Now, will you please hush? I did this with the best interests of this nation in mind. Can you imagine what great chaos would ensue if the populace learned that the president was obsessed with an android, especially at an important time like this? As I've said before, now is the time to take emergency measures. I'm certain that your wise excellency understands that. The president did not refute Madame Asari's claims. He just turned away and mumbled quietly to himself. I'm nothing but a prisoner in a cell without bars, but a cell nonetheless. I am now doomed to an eternity without a beautiful woman. Madame Asari feigned ignorance of the president's mumbling. Eventually, she sat him down at the table as before and began to patiently discuss national strategy. Now then, President Maluki, beginning today, our nation is going to carry out emergency maneuvers. Emergency maneuvers, indeed. So, What exactly do you suggest? There is an unlimited supply of gold buried beneath our nation. We will mine that up within a week's time. Who is going to mine it? Mining all that in only a week? First of all, we lack the manpower. Nor do we have enough machines. But that's no excuse. Leave everything to me. Leave it to you? The president sniffed disdainfully. It's glaringly obvious that your plan will fail. If only Professor Koick was still alive. I'm certain he'd succeed magnificently. You may be a politician, but you're no scientist. Scientists are only necessary in the beginning. After things develop to this point, execution is all that remains. And skillfully executing a large undertaking requires none other than politicians. Science can never dominate government, but government will invariably dominate science. I myself felt that way, at least until yesterday. After meeting Annette, the android, I began to doubt whether it was true. Oh, beautiful Annette. In the depths of the 10th room of Alicia District, there may be hundreds, even thousands of androids even more beautiful than her. The power of science is incomparable. Gold reigns over science. I will unearth the gold beneath us in a week and rebuild this nation with it. Gold roads, gold rooms, gold ceilings, gold walls, everything gold. What a wonderful plan, don't you think? Our nation will rule the world with gold. Rule the world? That requires iron, not gold. Gold cannot win a war. I disagree. With enough gold, there will be any number of countries offering to defend our nation with iron. All that is needed is to invite the prime minister of a country who tries to start a war to our nation and promise them a room built from pure gold, and wars will be a thing of the past. I doubt whether it will be that simple. I'm not nearly the optimist you are. In the middle of their conversation, they heard a delicate sound in the distance, a melody they had heard many times before. The music bath had begun. The music bath? It's the 18 o'clock music bath, the president said and blinked his eyes in surprise. Hold on a minute. It's 8 o'clock now. The music bath has started in error. What is the person in charge doing? Madame Asari, her demeanor free of panic, spoke to President Maluki like she was reprimanding a small child. Yes, it is the music bath. I've changed the music bath regulations beginning today. From now on, it will occur every other hour, 12 times in a day. By doing this, the people will get nearly 12 times as much work done. Sleeping and eating will no longer be necessary. After experiencing the music bath, the people will be stimulated enough to work for an hour and a half without rest, just like carriage horses. After that, we will simply give them another music bath. That's absolutely reckless. The late Professor Koick would never try such a thing. Professor Koick was a cunning fellow by nature, which is why he purposely limited the music bath to once a day. Otherwise, he too would be forced to work around the clock. I've known that for quite some time now. Only a true politician can actually increase a country's productivity in any real sense. It takes politicians in control to bring out the true power of science. At that moment, President Maluki heard his citizens' gasps of anguish ringing crystal clear in his ears, escalating as the music bath progressed. Chapter 10. President Maluki paced noisily around the room, his sullen mood a drastic change from the previous day. Sitting before the electric makeup table, the secretary massaged her secretory glands repeatedly with radio waves as she persistently spoke with the president. Your Excellency, in time you will thank me. You may not be aware of this, but there has been a recent rise in unspeakable, vile acts once the effects of the music bath have worn off, and the people grow bored. questionable sex experiments, men becoming women and women men. With all this going on, there's no telling how dejected their spirits will become. Your Excellency is far too lenient on them. It's an utter waste of time to allow them time to sleep, eat, think, or play. Such things will only cause boredom and serve no purpose except to lead them astray. This recent trend of depraved behavior is proof of that. For that reason, I've expanded the music bath to occur every other hour, not just to redeem this country, but to redeem its people. If we still fail to see sufficient effect, I would like to enact what I consider the ideal music bath, 24 hours a day without stopping. Only then can we command the entire nation as a single unit, with everyone moving in lockstep. That will rob them of every last bit of freedom. There's surely no need to go that far. I disagree. My plan will also immeasurably improve the people's well-being, for it will eliminate all of their worries for good. I object to this. Your Excellency, with all due respect, you only feel that way because you lack the aptitude to be a politician. Now you must do as I say, and trust me, a born politician, with the full responsibility for governing this country. Then you will resign. This will put your mind completely at peace. Don't be an idiot. That would be treason. I am the eternal ruler of this nation. I will never relinquish it to you. The secretary laughed scornfully. No matter what you say, I have you and this nation in the palm of my hand. It is now I who is the brains of the nation. You have no choice but to grant me full power. She jutted out her high cheekboned face and roared shamelessly with laughter. President Molucci stomped in frustration, realizing finally that he had lost both his beloved, the beautiful Lady Molucci, and the wise, venerable Professor Koek, all because of the secretary's plot. But dwelling on misfortune was pointless. It also struck the president that he had been reduced to the level of Madame Asari's plaything. Around 30 minutes later, the emergency alarm suddenly went off, shaking the foundations of Molucci Nation. So what could have happened? The people gathered before the loudspeakers in unison, faces pale from worry as they listened to the alarm blaring out, loud to some and soft to others. A message came in from Hoshimi, the head of the Division of Astronomy. Warning, this is a public announcement from the Division of Astronomy. At 8 o'clock and 40 minutes, a member of our staff observed an unusual rocket ship 10 degrees southeast from the North Star, and follow-up observations of the rocket ship in question have determined it to be on a direct collision course with Molucci Nation. Furthermore, the time of arrival has been estimated to be 23 o'clock, the day after tomorrow. A rocket from Mars. An attack from the Martians had been postulated for several centuries. The time of the dreaded attack had finally come. Apparently some radio wave signal, unknown to the Bureau of Transmission, has been strongly interfering with their receivers in the last 10 days. It must have been a signal coming from the Martian rocket. The Division of Astronomy had just now detected the rocket on their electronic telescope. If the Martians were to come, Professor Koek had once declared, it would not be with peaceful intentions. His fears had manifested now as an undeniable fact that could not be ignored. What might be the purpose of this attack? The people of Molucci Nation thought it was because of the inexhaustible layer of gold buried beneath them. No matter the era, those who yearn for riches must someday sacrifice themselves for those same riches. Faced with an urgent national crisis, out of necessity, the conflict between Secretary Madame Asari and President Molucci naturally resolved itself. Your Excellency, I feel that the negligence of the Division of Astronomy, who failed to detect the arrival of the Mars rocket arriving the day after tomorrow, must be severely reprimanded. We can consider that at a later time. More importantly, we should have them observe what type of weapons that rocket ship is equipped with and report that information to us. As they were talking, a report from the Division of Astronomy came in via the speaking tube. It was the voice of Division Head Hoshimi. Any further observation will be extremely difficult. Yes, that's right. What is going on over there? I'm beginning to doubt your patriotism. No, Madam Asari, that is not the problem. The entire staff is burning with patriotism. It's just they're overexcited. They're trying to manipulate their instruments, but not a single person can calm down enough to make precise observations. They're only operating at half of their normal efficiency. How weak you humans are. Well then, why don't you do the observations yourself? I'm no different than the others. It's as if my brain is somehow numb. In that case, I guess we should start the music bath again. No, madame, that's not going to work. It's the music bath that's doing the numbing. Damn it, I refuse to listen to any more excuses. The moment you or your staff don't fulfill their duties, I'm dispatching the executioner. Madam Asari, if you are going to give me the death penalty as you did with Professor Koick, you might as well do so now. I'd be better off dying as opposed to seeing myself degenerate further. Silence, Hoshimi. As of now, you are dismissed from your post as head and will be imprisoned. I appoint your assistant, Runami, as the new head of the division. Oh, Runami, that poor thing won't be able to handle the job. Why? Why would that be? Runami, a man with a weak mind and body, has gone completely crazy from the music bath. Not only has he stopped making observations, he's running around berserk, breaking any valuable equipment he can get his hands on with a wrench, all while singing the national anthem at the top of his lungs. Unable to endure the music bath, that poor man has lost his mind. That's impossible. I'm going to go see for myself immediately. You're just trying to scare me with your lies. The call ended there. Madame Asari began getting dressed. President Meluki approached Asari from behind with a look of concern. I can't have you rushing off to the Division of Astronomy now. If we don't give orders at once to the bombing and reconnaissance squadrons to deal with the rocket ship and prepare for combat, it will be too late. Madame Asari puffed out her cheeks in defiance, but she still halted her preparations to go out and quickly make a TV phone call to the reconnaissance and bombing squadron leaders. However, there was no sign of either of them on the receiver screen, just an empty square wall. What's happened to them? President Meluki asked. Nothing. It's just that the 10 o'clock music bath is beginning right now. Indeed, the music bath's melody could be heard softly in the distance. In accordance with the music bath regulations, the two squad leaders stepped out into the hallway and were sitting in their respective seats. Face distorted with rage, President Meluki spoke. Damn it! That's just not acceptable. You honestly had them cease their battle preparations and have a music bath instead? Having every member of this nation leave their posts and sit in a music bath, that's absolutely absurd. I beg to differ. If we don't do this, we will never be able to freely manipulate them. If the Martian rocket ship starts firing poison gas shells at us, do you expect us to politely request for them to wait for our nation's music bath to be finished? President Meluki was livid. Chapter 11. An announcement declared the music bath to be over. The secretary quickly summoned the reconnaissance and bombing squadron leaders to the TV phone. Their faces appeared on the screen, practically mirror images of each other, large googly eyes and emaciated cheeks, wheezing like asthma patients. The secretary was shocked. She had never seen them this haggard before. The squadron leaders were given strict orders to begin mobilization and prepare for combat. They respectfully accepted the orders, gaunt faces aglow with loyalty. The secretary was utterly delighted, her dejection and anger forgotten in an instant. "What do you think, Your Excellency? I've never seen these two tremble with such deep emotion." "I'm not too sure about that. Personally, I can no longer stand to look at the faces of my people." "Your Excellency, you're so easily affected by such things. Don't worry, just leave it to those two loyal leaders, and everything will be fine." After only 4 or 5 minutes passed, the bell of the TV phone rang, and the faces of the two squadron leaders appeared once again on the screen. The exhaustion on their faces was unmistakable. It was as if they had aged 5 or 6 years in this short period of time. The two leaders expressed how they had issued an emergency summons to the soldiers and then called roll. But they went on to give a shocking report of what happened next. Despite the soldiers' high spirits, they were all in poor health, without a single individual suitable for combat. At first, the secretary couldn't believe this, but after thoroughly questioning them, she had no choice but to grudgingly accept the truth. Every soldier had been severely affected by the music bath. Some were driven mad, or nearly so. Others lost 1/5 of their body weight in only a day's time, or even fell ill from acute disease to their vital organs. The result was a state of complete annihilation for both the reconnaissance and bombing squadrons, whose duty it was to drive back the enemy and protect the nation, despite not having actually engaged in combat. Milwaukee Nation had essentially committed suicide. In under 3 hours, the Secretary's 24-hour music bath regulation had unleashed terrible devastation on the nation. The only two people still sitting comfortably were the chubby Madame Masari and President Milwaukee, who had no obligation to be exposed to the music bath. During this entire time, announcements continued from the Division of Astronomy in a feeble voice about the approaching Martian rocket ship. "What has happened to this nation?" said President Milwaukee, no longer making any effort to conceal his despair. The squadron leader answered from within the screen. "Of course, at this rate the Martian rocket ship will have no trouble infiltrating Milwaukee Nation. If we had only 100 strong soldiers, we could prevent the capital from falling, at least for a time. Even 50 soldiers might make a difference, but my squadron is currently... The secretary, listening to this, twitched an eyebrow as if finally making up her mind about something. "Aha! The last resort!" she screamed suddenly. "The last resort?" "Yes, the last resort, breaking down Alicia District's inner door and getting a hold of the androids hidden there by Professor Koek. Then we deploy them into combat." "Of course, the androids," President Milwaukee said as he clapped his hands, though the look of concern promptly returned to his face. "But is there truly a collection of strong robots like that in Alicia District? Besides, that door just won't budge. The word is that it will explode if forced open." "Well, we haven't confirmed that yet, but I do have a feeling it's true. I'm going to open that door, sacrificing whatever is needed." "Sacrificing whatever is needed," said the squadron leader with a frown. Right then, the secretary, trembling in anticipation in the middle of the room, suddenly gave a resolute order. "I command the bombing squadron to advance to Alicia District and destroy the door there at once. The reconnaissance squadron is to wait in reserve for further orders." On the screen, the two squadron leaders' faces stiffened like fish taken out of the water. President Maluki moaned and threw himself onto the sofa dramatically. Back in Alicia District, Penn and Bara looked nothing like their former selves, their skin and bone bodies resembling mummies. Penn was drawing a diagram of some incomprehensible device on his drafting board, drenched by a constant flow of drool from his lips. Bara, now a bona fide man, worked noisily on a calculator, continuing a reckless effort to perform the division of an indivisible number down to several billion decimal places. At times, he would randomly call the name of his beloved Annette, as if delirious from fever. The bombing squadron suddenly barged into Alicia District, now looking like a gloomy mental institution, and the large group of weary, overexhausted soldiers poured in like a mudslide. Shocked, Penn and Bara clung to the walls like bats. On a signal from the leader, they began the work of destroying the door to the 10th room. A job that normally took a single person now required over 20 people. One after another, soldiers died pitifully, gripping the oxyhydrogen cutting torch. Even the smallest exertion put a sudden stop to their weary hearts. In her private room, the secretary's mood quickly deteriorated as she digested the reports coming in moment by moment. Corpses continued to pile up outside the 10th door, and when she heard that not only could the door not be opened, but the dead bodies could no longer be carried away, Madame Asari gave the order for the reconnaissance squadron on standby to advance. But what can one expect from soldiers who are like a cluster of seriously ill families? Nevertheless, the door was finally destroyed. But once the heroes of the reconnaissance squadron saw that beyond the door was another resilient door, they fell onto their asses like a bundle of rice plants toppled by the wind. The secretary organized the National Army and ordered them to move out. After that, the secondary and tertiary national squadrons were dispatched to assist. Still, the entrance to the 10th room didn't budge. The national anthem was played continuously in order to encourage the troops, but having exceeded their maximum dosage of stimulation, the only thing it encouraged was an unproductive loss of consciousness. In the end, the only two members of Maluki Nation with any strength left were President Maluki and Madame Asari. Even so, the secretary made no attempt to give the order to cease attacking. She was like a woman possessed. They finally exited the room and advanced down the hallway towards Alicia District. For the first time, they were baptized by the music bath, a very pleasing sensation. But as time went on, their brains were gradually cooked by the fast-paced music. A nausea-inducing, unpleasant feeling slowly crept up on them. They practically tumbled into the entrance of Alicia District. Echoing, blood-curdling screams of the dead. Piles upon piles of corpses. They looked around in horror. Deeper in, a closed door seemed to taunt them. "Shall we?" asked President Maluki. "All right, let's go," responded Madame Asari. "Let's charge the door." "Okay, here we go." It appeared that even they themselves did not know their objective in charging the door. Burning with the passion of martyrs, the last surviving members of Maluki Nation rushed headlong towards the steel door, following their self-assigned orders. At that moment, there was a sensation of their bodies being enveloped by yellow sparks. That was the end. They lost consciousness as if tossed from a precipice, and in the blink of an eye the room fell into the deep silence of a centuries-old graveyard. But if someone were to listen carefully, they would hear a strange, grating sound, like something was being dragged deep within the earth. Transmitted through the thick walls, the sound gradually intensified, as if something was rising up from below. Moments later came a metallic clang, and the iron door of the 10th room, which up to now had seemed to have a massive, immovable stone affixed to it, began gradually, soundlessly, to open inward. Who could be opening the door? Who was on the other side of that door? The figure who calmly appeared on the other side of the open door to the 10th room was none other than Professor Koek, a man long assumed dead. A strange, beetle-like suit of armor covered his body. Behind the professor, roughly 500 androids resembling a net accompanied him in silence. The professor turned the first dial attached to his suit. A faint red flame arced between his shoulders as electricity was discharged. The distant melody of the nation's music bath suddenly halted, as if a switch had been flipped. The professor now adjusted the second dial. The army of robots standing in the back walked past him in a well-formed line towards the front of the room. Two of the robots stayed behind in place of Pen and Bara. Each android took up an important post to replace a lost citizen of Maluki Nation. Professor Koek then turned the third dial. In response, a soft, pleasant melody began to play. Shortly after, an android's face appeared on the room's TV phone. The face turned towards the professor and began speaking. The song that had been decreed by law has been completely destroyed. In its place, a hymn to mankind has begun. The professor nodded quietly. A music bath to extol a new humanity. Would the massive piles of corpses be reborn by this new music bath? But the dead bodies, now cold like tombstones, remained motionless. The professor entered the command room and, using the massive control panel inside, skillfully manipulated 500 soulless androids. Great shrieks rang out as electric cannons fired heavy shells in succession towards the Martian rocket ship, all at the hands of androids. Several hundred attack ships rose from the surface in a beeline towards the sky. Underground, mountains of artillery shells, poison gas shells, and demagnetizing shells were manufactured, all at the hands of androids. The professor listened peacefully, entranced by the melody of this new music bath, a hymn extolling humanity, a song for humanity. Was it played for the citizens of Maluki Nation, the frigid corpses? Or was it played to transplant human souls into the professor's beautiful androids? No, it was a requiem played for the sole surviving human, Professor Koek, who now wielded absolute power. To the professor, a man of outstanding intelligence, reviving Maluki Nation's heaps of corpses was not a particularly difficult undertaking, but he didn't have the slightest intention of doing so. Scientists are, in the end, a cold-hearted bunch. In truth, Professor Koek had done all this in order to construct his long-cherished utopia with firm conviction and great confidence. After becoming privy to the secretary's plot, he had fashioned an android in his likeness and sent it to explode in President Maluki's room. This was for two reasons: to set the stage for today's events and to cover up the android's existence. Immersed in the new music bath, an anthem for a new humanity, the emergent android nation of Koek took the first step towards the establishment of a new world.